Thank you all for being here. Krista Ulujuk I'm Krista Ulujuk Zawadski, and I'm from Rankin Inlet, Nunavut, and I'm going to be moderating this panel. So we are an artist collective. We're called Agguaq, which means like to patch up. And you'll see photos of like patches on clothing. So it's a reference to that. And we're going to talk about what we've been doing as a collective. We've been visiting museums and going home and then creating stuff, Nungak mostly. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today and some other things that we've made together, but also on our own. We've been a collective for about 2 years now, and it's been amazing. We didn't know each other. A lot of us didn't know each other before we came together. And Lori Tagongnak Randall did a call out asking for artists if they're interested in joining this project. And so that's how we came together. There's a few of us are not here right now. They couldn't make it, like Lori Tagongnak Randall, Michelle Gordon, and Avery Qinnirajaattuq. And I also want to mention that we have babies in our collective as well. I really love that we have babies, and we've really worked together to open up the space because that's how we are as Inuit. Babies are always around. And so we have babies in collections, and it's always exciting. So you'll see some of the photos. And so we'll talk about, everyone will have a chance to introduce themselves, and then we'll talk about the projects that we've been working on and some of the clothing that we have here. And I'm sure I forgot some things about Agguaq, so if anyone wants to jump in, you can. Oh, yeah, and then, yeah, I'll talk a little bit about, we met earlier this year and did a group project together, so we'll get to that after our introduction. So I'm going to pass it on for everyone to introduce themselves just briefly.
Hello, please feel welcome. Ubanga Brenda Amak&ak Putulik. My name is Brenda Putulik Amak&ak. My Inuk name. I too am from Rankin Inlet, but originally from Nauyat. You probably seen the biography online, and the things that is not in there is my namesakes, Atika. They're both male. So growing up, I was forbidden to sew, forbidden to have long hair or play with dolls or wear dresses. But I observed the female women around me, even though they taught me the basics of sewing, but I wasn't allowed to in respect to my namesakes. So it wasn't until I became a mother that I started sewing. So that's just a brief description of myself.
Hi, my name is Winifred Nungak from Qinnirajaattuq, Nunavik. I'm a full-time seamstress from Winifred Designs. My son calls me Winifred Designs. I'm the only woman from Nunavik, and everyone else is from Nunavut, and I'm very excited, so happy to be with this group. I'll pass it on to Melissa.
Hello, my name is Melissa Attagutsiak. I'm from Nunavut, and I've been sewing for the last 10 years. I really wanted to connect with the group, and that's how I ended up with these amazing women. Thank you.
Tumwasiwisi, welcome. From Rostina from Panelists. I'm the elder in training. Come April, I'm going to co-op to get my official status. I When they originally started, they were all on the youth category, and Avery, they had wanted someone a little bit more older with a little bit more knowledge. Then they brought me on as their elder, but I'm not there yet, so I'm the elder in training. I have been sewing for 40 plus years, but still don't think I'm an expert like Winnie yet. So when I'm sewing, it's like, oh no, Winnie's not going to approve of this line.
When we first came together as a collective, we really thought about what we wanted to do together and what our goals or missions are as a group. And that was one of the things that we realized in our very first meeting, was that we needed, like, it felt out of place that there weren't elders or knowledge holders to guide us, to mentor us through this experience. And so we thought about who would be a great fit, who has the right energy, who's energetic and open-minded and caring. And so that's when we asked Brenda and Rostina to join our collective, and it's been amazing. And some of the mission or the goals that we had was, we realized that there's all this knowledge, like at home, like in our own homes. We're all seamstresses, and we've learned from people, from family members, but we wanted to vitalize that knowledge, like strengthen the knowledge that we already have. And we thought about how can we do that. And we thought, okay, we could go to museums and look at these collections and old clothing and really study them and learn from them, and then go home and take the knowledge that we learned from each other and from the collection. The clothing speaks to us when we're visiting them, right? And so that's what we've been striving to do, is strengthen our knowledge, go home, and then share that knowledge with our family and community and Inuit in general. So that's what we've been doing the last 2 years, and I think we've been doing a really good job at that, as you can see. One of the things we did earlier this year is we thought, okay, what can we do? We visited a few museums. We went to the Winnipeg Art Gallery, the Manitoba Museum. We went to the McCord's tour in Avatak, and we went to the AMNH in New York City as well. And we thought, we keep meeting up in these places, but we were really thinking, we want to do something together. So we had this idea to go to Iqaluit so that we could go to Miqsukta and buy fabric there and meet. And that's what we did for about a week in February. We rented a Airbnb. We had this whole house together, and then we would meet every day, and we worked on patterns together. You could see you'll see some of the photos where it looks like a sweatshop, but that's what we were doing. And we thought, okay, what's our next step? How are we gonna show people what we're doing? So we came up with this idea to do a group project. So we thought it through. We had different ideas, and Melissa made it's like our central pattern. So she made this bodice, and our assignment, our homework, was to go home and personalize it based on what we've learned in the museums and at home. Because we go home and then we talk to people like, hey, I've seen this on this clothing that I saw. What does it mean? Or like, what I've never seen this pattern before. So that's what we've been doing at home. And so that's basically our group project. We have this central pattern, and then we personalized it. And so each of us have made something very different from each other, but it all comes from the same place. And that's what's on display in the FOFA right now in the Ilagit exhibition. So if you haven't had a chance to see it, I highly recommend to go see it. And you can see, you know, like the central pattern, everything, they're all connected. Yeah. And then, yeah, so we're all wearing things too. I use the same pattern to make what I'm wearing, my jacket, and Brenda's wearing the same pattern. And then this is what Melissa's working on.
So this is the top part is the base pattern that we all worked with, and then I added the Agguaq and the from a pattern I got in Winnipeg, and I've got a little bit done here that I'm gonna be doing along here as well. I got an injury, so I wasn't able to complete it.
So I'll just pass it along and people can talk about what they've created. And like this piece, for example. So you'll see some of the photos.
Yeah, that's the top I made. I was inspired by 2 different amauti that we visited, that we saw from the museums. That's how it came together. We were able to copy some shapes, the size on paper. So when we got home, we got the sizes, and from that pattern, that's how I made that top. It was inspired by the different colors of beads we saw, and I don't bead, so it was all trimming. The fabric is, it's a soft shell. It's kind of like warm on the inside and smooth on the outside. So that was my inspiration from the amauti that we saw. They're all natural fur, caribou made or sealskin, and that's what inspired me to make from that pattern. And yeah, I think I'm done.
We call it the Melissa pattern, for lack of a better word. My black dress is also hanging at Fofa. It's a black tutu leather dress with purple sealskin, and I asked Krista to send me tutu leather with the most holes on it, so that I could patch up the holes with beads to depict the night sky. And the front kini and the back aku was an actual size of the 1869 amauti that we saw here. Was it at McCord? There's a little backstory to that. Inuit only have oral history, and I've heard only like maybe a handful of like really good stories from my grandmother. And I've been overseas to London and Ireland, and they have like gazillion history on everything. And I was super inspired by how much history they have. Long story short, went to Montreal, and before we came here, we saw the website on the things that they have. And I clicked on that 1869 South Baffin Amauti, and I really wanted to see it. So when we came in, I could feel her energy right away. And I was like really holding back my tears. And as I got closer, I was in her space. I was connected to where she was. It was like I teleported to where she was, and I could see her probably cleaning sealskins by the ocean with kids playing in the background, the sun shining. And she would have had a 5x5 small piece of wood if she's not using her thigh to clean the fat off of the sealskins, which she needs 5 in order to make one amauti. And I was right there, and I couldn't contain myself. I cried and cried and cried, and Krista had to like just hold me and regrown me, and I just absolutely fell in love with her because it's from 1869, and it was not new. So it was from like maybe like even earlier 1800s. That's my history. That's the stories that my grandmother told were true. It really happened. It really became, and I decided to replicate her of actual size. Winnie and I copied the front and the back, and then we took a tape measure and measured everything. And this is as close as I could get to her. And that's the story of this amauti. There's a few pictures of it side by side with the 1869 one. And that was the same inspiration that I had on that black tutu dress.
Okay, I guess I'm next. First of all, yes, I was asked if I could take part in this group, and I thought about it. And what made me agree to it is Qinnirajaattuq, the next generation. Before I explain my piece, I would like to first ask my granddaughter, Sakata. She's the reason why I'm here. So what could I leave behind for the next generation? So in visiting all the museums, for me, I was not inspired by just one. Rather, I was inspired by all of them. So coming back, and when we got the pattern from Melissa that was our jumping off point. And the inspiration in going to each museum is that they made something out of nothing, a bone, a sinew, and either a caribou skin or seal skin. So if you were to take, I don't know, this skin, when it's raw, how much is it? Now, when you start putting in a part of you or all of you, it becomes something. So my inspiration was the ancestors and the choice of materials I chose. Mine is the gold three-piece suit, combining tradition, Inuit culture, and today. And the gold piece is for the next generation. So what I did is that I chose to use scraps. I chose to repurpose whatever I had. So the gold piece is my daughter's prom dress. And Inuit would see a button and they would make it Inuk, so to speak. So I looked at my daughter's prom dress and make it Inuk because I want the next generation to be proud of who they are, because I was raised in an era where it was assimilation. To a point where we were put to shame that we were no longer sharing this pattern or this pattern because it's too Inuk, therefore we're going to get criticized or put down or put to shame. Assimilation. So it almost went extinct. Now I want to present in a way that the next generation will be proud to wear their Inukness. My goal was to revitalize, keep the essence of Inuit practices, make nothing into something. So it's my version of a three-piece suit. You could wear it as a whole, or you could wear it two-piece or one-piece. And it's designed so that any size would fit, and it would complement the best of yourself, because Inuit lines are an illusion. Once you figure that out, that you can complement the best part of your body by manipulating the lines, accentuate certain areas.
One of the things that I feel is our greatest strength is the support that we have for each other as a collective. Like I said, we didn't all know each other beforehand, but I feel like now it feels like we're family, even in just a short amount of time. And like Brenda's saying, you know, we're coming out of this era of colonization. You know, our generation is, a lot of us are like taking back our culture and language and our patterns and that sort of thing. And I think that's what we've been doing really well. And that's exactly it. I think we're all thinking about the future. How do we maintain this knowledge? How do we strengthen it for the next generation? Well, we're looking back for strength and taking that forward. And so I want to ask any of you if you can share something meaningful that has happened, either when we're in collections or when we're at home sewing or when we're together, or we have Zoom calls, which have been a lot of fun because it helps a lot when you're really struggling. Like, I just can't figure out this pattern, or this zipper won't work for me, and then we're all like, no, try it this way, or do this like through Zoom, which is kind of cool. But can any of you share anything meaningful? There's another mic over there too.
It's been really meaningful to have my baby with me. He's here in Montreal as well. And like everyone else, I'm doing this for my boys. I'm wanting to strengthen what I've learned over the last few years and produce wearable art that has a meaning and preserves the culture. And so having my babies get to witness that and experience this with me and with the group has been really wonderful, because not all spaces are welcoming for babies. Like bringing a baby into a museum and looking at these beautiful pieces, it was so incredible. And my boys' love for art shows that they're watching.
For me, is being able to visit these clothing pieces, these belongings, and bringing them back to life. That was the most meaningful for me. They're just sitting there, and we're not seeing them on daily basis. They're being stored. So when we visited them, like Rose Tina said, we all cried on that Amauti, like all of us. We were so touched. It was really powerful at that moment. And the best part was we were able to copy the Qinnirajaattuq and the Agguaq. That's when I got home, all I wanted to do was make that shape, that Amauti. So I made it. We were saying, because now our Amauti are more big, but the one we saw at the museum, it's really small with a very tiny Qinnirajaattuq. I wore it today so I could show everyone, because it's not the one we use today. It's very really tiny. Like for me, it was even weird sewing this because I thought it was like too small, because that's what I'm not used to seeing. And it's really showing the hips too, and it's we call it the cleavage. We're bringing back the cleavage back. That's what we called it.
The elders that I used to hang out with used to say, the higher it was, the sexier they were. So we're bringing back cleavage. That's cleavage.
So that's what I was talking about, how lines, you could manipulate them. Visiting these museums allowed us to see different shapes and sizes, how they manipulate the lines to help you showcase the best of yourself. So it didn't matter the size. Like, did you know that if you were overweight, Inuit considered you as rich? So being, let's say, larger, so to speak, you could still use those lines to complement the best of yourself. So Inuit saw things in a different perspective where patterns and designs is universal, but at the same time, illusion. That's what I took out of the museum, is that they use illusion to complement the human being, to complement the best of themselves. So it allowed me to fill in the gaps with all the patches of knowledge that was missing. So by going to the museums, it started filling in the missing information.
Aside from the Moti that I met, the biggest thing that impacted me was all of those things that we saw, whether it was garments, whether it was trinkets, whether it was hunting gear. Someone at one point had used it, and they carry energy, and they heard Inuktitut being spoken. And then like Krista had said, she plays the radio sometimes when she's with belongings. And then I saw this tiny doll made out of wood that has her hair bun like the Greenlandics with the hair, and she was anatomically correct with saggy boobs and a belly. I loved her. So we played with her, and like Qinnirajaattuq, and like somebody played with her before, and like those Toy Story movies, they go, Ambe! So I thought of those, and then I started playing with her, and then whenever we spoke, because we have different dialects, we tend to speak to each other in English, even though we all speak Inuktitut. Then when I remembered that they probably miss hearing Inuktitut, then Inuktitut like just playing with them, and just because they're locked up, they're in a vault somewhere, and I'm glad they're locked up. Otherwise, we wouldn't have known. Who carried them when they disintegrated, went back to the earth. So yeah, that's what I got out of the museums. We're still going to do more, right?
I just want to add to what Rostina's saying. I visit a lot of museums, and I love pushing the boundaries of the museums. So we've been having a lot of fun, like trying to figure out how far we could go while we're in there. Some museums will let us kind of like have free range in there, and some museums are not. So it's been a learning experience for all of us to navigate these spaces, but it's been really powerful and empowering, I think, for all of us to go in there and bring our energy and just like bring our language and our Inukness into the collections to be with these piqutiit and piqutiit and Nungak, yeah. So that's one of the things I recommend, is push boundaries in museums. Has there been any aha moments for any of you that you learned something new, like a new pattern or a new stitch, or that you can talk about?
It's the cleavage. When I got back, my daughter had her baby, so I made her a couple of amotics with extra high cleavage. That's what I'm brought. That's what touched me, and that's what I'm going to like. Yeah, do it. Just do it.
For me, say again the question.
Any aha moments or any new knowledge?
It's not so much as an aha moment, it's more solidifying the stories and the oral history that has been told to me and confirming. You know how when you're given something and you're not sure, you have to first do the research before you determine whether if it's facts. Sealskin, caribou skin, first of all, the patterns and the design, well, I would say patterns is different. Like what Winnie said, that it feels so small. But this pattern is designed for a caribou skin or seal skin to complement the person's best of themselves, regardless of the size. Now, when you ship to fabric, you have to alter pattern thinking, and how we also now have to consider with this pattern, you have to consider a t-shirt, a sweater, a bra, like, you know. Whereas with the skins, it's skin and seal skin or the caribou skin, so you don't have to consider that, where you elements has to be also considered. So shifting from material to seal skin or caribou skin was my challenge in revitalizing the patterns and researching how certain things became bigger, like the hood. Now, with our journey, we're now promoting, you can now make the hood smaller on the amauti to complement the human being. Like, you can manipulate the pattern to complement the person. That's one of my aha moments.
For me, it was the same as Rostina. It was the cleavage. We're bringing it back.
I think I take something away or gain something with every gathering we have, and it always feels really natural to be together, and that's what I love about it.
I have two questions or 2 points. Winnie, can you talk about the the little synagogue nubbin on the hood? And then Rosina, can you talk about that hood too after?
The top I made that is at the gala. It has a teeny tiny, what do you call it? Gugukpak. Gugukpa. We saw an amauti in New York City that had, well, for me, I connected to that amauti because it had a hood like this, a rounded hood like this. Because from Nunavik, that's how our amautic hoods are, and the pointy hoods are from Nunavut. And that was the first amauti I saw in New York City with a rounded hood, but it had a tiniest, cutest little point, like a fingertip. I just had to I had to make it in that hood. And Rostina, our elder, was explaining to us during our visits in museums. She would talk about how Inuit would merge. Is that how you call it? Like from South Baffin and Nunavik. It was all, I wish we had that, we had a map to point them out. That's how she explained it to us, how Inuit connected back then. And that hood was from my region, and that teeny tiny point was from her region. It was so beautiful. You guys have to go museums.
So this generation defines this pattern is from Panukto, this pattern is from Kudrak, and they get offended if a Kudrak woman made Pang style. But history shows that even Greenland and Pang merged, Iglulik and other closer areas merged. Cambridge Bay to Rankin area, they merged, and Rankin area merged to northern Quebec. It's because they shared hunting grounds. And when they were hunting long distances, they'd find other families, and they would say, oh, I like that part of your, I'm going to do that on my next project. So there was a little bit of a mix to it. This one is different from how it's done now. This one depicts the 1869 Amauti. The current ones usually have a wider tip. The bottom is a depiction of the tutu palette. Kailangan, no? There's more stories to it, but this one will be considered South Baffin style, and we don't see this connected to the back anymore. It's usually a separate piece. That's the time, remember? when we saw her, it was like, Kukupahana. It's always fun. So those are the differences, but the similarities that we saw that traveled through different areas that connected everyone, because all Inuit were like moved, like they didn't stay in one spot.
In regards to patterns, you could tell depending on the pattern, looking at the pattern first, and then the design. So where I had chosen was my ancestors to acknowledge and show my respect that first I have to understand my bloodline's patterns and also my namesakes, because once you understand where that pattern derived from, it tells a lot of stories. Like Inuktitut also adopted what's called Mother Hubbard, is because they married to Inuktitut. That's how there's a connection there with Inuktitut and Inuktitut. But Inuktitut, they too have their own patterns. And it seemed, so that's where the Mother Hubbard comes from, with the big pouch, like here. Inuktitut and Central Inuit has that. But there's a line there where you could see where these Inuit on this side of the world is more closely to that pattern. For whatever reason, there's that uniqueness. So once you start understanding the pattern, where it derived from, next is the design. There are certain designs that only certain area has. So once you understand that, then everything else makes sense. Because we are one. Our patterns derive from one. As time went on, we chose subtle changes, but if once you understand the traditional pattern, suddenly everything else is going to make sense. That by visiting these museums, it just makes sense. And intermarriage, where inspiration, that technically there is no this patterns and nobody else's. That when you marry, you have influence and you keep part of yourself in the designs, in the patterns. And afterwards, I don't know. Then you start to see that the Inuit back then knew evolution. Things are always evolving. So this is why patterns are, you could see in the Inuit culture that this is a material culture. But at the same time, Inuit have always known about evolution. And it shows in the museum pieces and also the pieces that we have here.
Some of the discussions that we've had together, we've talked a lot about supporting one another and our personal experiences with learning to sew or sharing patterns and that sort of thing. So we've really talked a lot about the protocols around patterns and sharing and that sort of thing. And some of us have experienced lateral violence around that, where people won't share certain patterns with you, or they won't share knowledge with you because you're not part of their family or for whatever reason. And so it's been really empowering for us to work together because we see these barriers and we've been wanting to break them down. And we all understand that our culture is not static, that it's alive. Like these patterns are alive. Like Brenda's saying, these patterns evolve. And that's one of the biggest things that we've been striving to do, is to like make contemporary clothing that's appealing to us, but also the next generation, because we want to break down those barriers. You know, we feel like a lot of us feel constrained with these rules or, you know, just barriers that we come across. So that's why we brought some of these things to show people what we've done to like push these boundaries and like to show the contemporary clothing or like the colors or like how we change a pattern to fit our aesthetic or our like what we like today. So anyone?
The other thing that I really want to bring back is the Avitat style is mostly Greenlandic as we know it now, but it was also South Baffin because of the hunting ground connection. So based on the Avitat stuff that I saw in the Greenlandic, the museums, because all museums pretty much have one form or another of the Avitat, meaning the cut up Nalok pieces on sealskin. So I did one inspired by that and made out of scrap Nalok. And just personalize it to what I like instead of just copying and pasting what I've seen. So that's the other thing that I like really want to bring back too. The other thing we forgot are there's 3 other members, 2 other members, 3 other members that are not here. Lori is the one that made the call out for artists and seamstresses to whoever wanted to go to visit museum archives for inspiration. And there's also Avery, who's the baby of the group. She just had a baby, so she wasn't able to make it. And Michelle, for other reasons, wasn't able to come. Michelle is the one who made the Canada Goose parka, so we have like some celebrities here. And she also has a piece at the FOFA with the printed lace multi hood. Just wanted to make a shout out to them too.
So we're going to open it up, and it's a bit like show and tell. So if you want to come up and take a look at some of these pieces, or if you have any questions you want to ask about. So yeah, does anyone have any questions for anyone?
Thank you so much. What a beautiful and amazing panel. I've learned so much. You spoke several times about the inspiration that collections and museums have provided for you. I also think you are an incredible inspiration to these museum collections. And I wondered, it seems like there's a really interesting parallel project here to enrich what is known about the very pieces that you're looking at from your own perspectives, from your knowledge and perspectives, and the pattern protocols that you talked about today. Have you encountered that in the museums you've been working with, actively looking to enrich what's known about the objects that you're looking at with your own knowledge?
We have, in a way, tried to correct information that's in museum collections and in database to the best of our ability, but that's not the reason why we're there. And if that's what the museum wants, then they should engage with us. So it's more like the agency. We're trying to keep the agency on our end. That's a great question, though. I know that's been asked a lot. When people go into museums, like, what are you bringing to the museum? Well, that's not why we're there. That's not our priority, even though it is important that the information in museums should be updated and names should be spelled correctly. And but we have done that. Like this, the piece with the spoons is at the AMNH in New York, and I saw on the database that it said it's from Ulujuk, but I was like, no, I've seen the exact same one at the NMNH at the Smithsonian in DC or at the collection in Suitland. But I was like, this is not from Ulujuk. So I made the connection for them, but that was, just because it was important for me that it's correct. Does that answer your question? Yeah, thank you.
Am I interrupting someone else? Is this on? Yes. Oh, okay. Okay, so I'm doing a similar project just on my own besides my own work. Usually, so I'm Swampy Cree, Mashkego Inuk, and our dresses, women's dresses, have been lost to memory. And same thing, the only reason I know about our dresses is from collection in London showing small wooden dolls with the actual, but what was on there that I just can't figure out on my own is it's like the porcupine quill is made on a loom on a really wide belt and a wide breastplate. And I've seen some videos, but from different nations, so it's probably not the same technique. So, and I'm not part of a collective. That's actually a really good idea. To be more generous and like trying to make these dresses together with my community. But what would your suggestion be if there's no information out there on how to make something? Like you can look at it, but for me, like I just can't figure out how to do it, because quill work is usually wrapped, and even like looking at your stuff here, like the quill work is so there's so many different techniques. I'm looking at just like big eyes looking. So what would your suggestion be to try and learn that when there's no cultural memory in our communities about it anymore?
First of all, how for me it was storytelling. When you're talking to the elders and ask them to tell a story, and once they get comfortable enough, then ask them about the clothing and why is it this way. And I can recall when during assimilation, when we were put to shame to be not wear our traditional garments, we had what's called Inuit games, where the communities around Kivalliq get together to one place, and this was to promote tourism. But it was our free to be Inuk without no restrictions. There was my family members, great aunts, and my great grandmother. There was an and Inuk from Akbet came with the traditional garment with the pouched wind pants, so to speak, with the these kinds of tuilik amauti. And they started talking about it because they were assimilated, where you were put to shame to talk about it. And that's where that a lot of shame comes in. But when you give an elder permission that it's okay, that religion will not condemn you, RCMPs no longer have control, that it's okay. Rather, what do you want for your descendants? What are you going to leave behind with your descendants? Do you want them to know your ancestors? And I found that that helps the elders realize that it's okay to talk about, it's okay to be indigenous now, that I'm not going to be condemned, or that assimilation is not going to be there anymore. So that would be my advice, by empowering your elders. And these are some things that we are trying to do by leading by example, that it's okay to ask questions, that it's okay to choose different colors other than black and white, that it's okay to be proud of who you are. It's just elders have been so colonized that it's normal now. Whereas when you give them permission, then they'll start to remember. If they don't remember, okay, take them out on the land, and then they'll start to remember. So that's my suggestion, and I hope I answered your question.
If it needs to come to you, it will. I had a great desire to know about the Amauti. And my mother was not a seamstress. She was a hunter, because my father was in a wheelchair. And I wanted to know everything about the Amauti. And it comes to me. If it wants to come to you, it will.
Yeah, we believe that too with stories. Yeah, that's awesome. But yeah, I have a Chapan great grandmother who's almost 100, and they just make moose hide jackets. They're not like traditional, and then they copy Plains Cree buckskin dresses. But I know, we had tattoos, everything, but like, but my grannies were mean to teach me. Like I'd make something around, they'd rip it up. So I never wanted to ask them anything.
Because we were expected to be perfect right off the spot, because it was for survival.
Yeah, it's true.
That's where.
But I'm too sensitive.
I just want to say, my sister's like that to me too, and like, it's frustrating when she takes it apart, but you just keep trying. And I think that you can look to maybe neighboring communities and look at their techniques, and then try to figure out, like, does it look right? Is this how we did it, sort of thing? You know, like Rostina was saying, there's like things merge. So there could be clues in places near where you live. There was a question in the back.
I think it's a recurring theme, a great panel as well. It was really interesting, but it's a recurring theme, this kind of seeing transmission of information through sight and also through oral histories, which is really interesting. And I was wondering if you could, again, you spoke a little bit on it, but really, how do you get those techniques, and how do you really understand a garment through only seeing and some touching? Sorry, anyway.
Well, in going to the museums, first of all, when you are, the moment you're you're exposed to people sewing, because there was not much variety when it comes to clothing, so we had to make, my mother and my great grandmother and so on had to make their own clothing. But when you're in a culture where visually you're always learning, even as a toddler, that's one of the reasons why we say let's bring children, so that They're learning. They're going to remember this. They're going to remember that. Like I remember stitching techniques watching my great aunt giving me very little information and then putting it aside. But when you're in it, it just comes back to you. So viewing education, viewing learning, the moment you are a child, you are learning. So seeing sewing and sewing techniques when you've been around it all your life, and when you see it, oh, I know exactly the technique. I could see it. It's just one of those things that when you're around it, you just got to look at it. Oh, it makes sense.
I think part of it is like the belongings, the clothing, the Nungak, they're testing your boundaries as well, or pushing your boundaries as well. So it's this like reciprocal relationship. And I think when you come across something and you're trying to figure out like how do you do this? How did they make this? I think this is where we've all experienced it, where we keep trying till we figure it out. And that's where stubbornness is good and stamina, but it's also like I take inspiration from my Amak&ak because that's what she would say. Just keep trying.
We were talking about earlier, it's in our DNA. Yeah, it's, for me, I grew up in the 90s where my grandmother, my mom would sew. That's how I learned, well, by watching. And in my region, we go to culture class at grade 4, and that's when we start sewing. And it starts from there. And that's how I learned. And I love sewing and seeing these belongings and being familiar with touching them, like knowing the patterns from previous creations. I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's in our DNA, if that makes sense.
Quite often when I'm working on a new garment, I listen to what it wants to be, because I can try to picture it all I want, but when I'm making it, I can kind of almost see where the next stitches are going, or what I need to add or what I don't need to add. And so it exactly is, it's in our DNA.
For recreating something that was made 150 years ago, I don't have that pattern. The amotis we make are 3XL. Winnie and I were fortunate to copy only the tail part and the front part. That's all we had. Pictures and tape measure. We tape measured everything on that thing and put my hand on everywhere so I could videos, and I used 5 different patterns that I have to adjust the hood, because every piece, every corner has to match. If it doesn't match, it won't come out. It won't turn. It won't. It's going to be ugly. And I used a different pattern for the sleeves. I used a pattern that we copied from WEG that was made by a lady 100-some-year-old from Panelists. I used her sleeve pattern. I used my friend's hood pattern, and then I made this myself, and then made that myself with lots of tape measure, with lots of trying to think outside of what's done now, because that was difficult for us. After somebody tearing out our stitches, we had to come away from that and teach each other to be, it's okay to make mistakes and redo it, and then do it your way instead of how your grandma did it. So a lot of tape measure, and if you have access to something similar to it, create it, and then it'll take itself from there.
Are there any other questions or comments?
Yeah, this is very inspiring, and I would like to follow the work that you're doing also in the future. So if you have an Instagram or anywhere that I could follow you, I would love to do that. And then, where are you going next? What are you dreaming of doing next?
We get that comment a lot, and it's coming. Yeah, we're going to do social media soon, but I think first we wanted to do the work together kind of in isolation before sharing and showing the world. But yeah, that's coming. What's next is we want to continue visiting museums, but also continue sewing together. And we have a project in mind with a museum that I can't really say anything about right now, or two projects in mind with two different museums. But we're going to continue doing what we've done. But we also want to go to Europe. That's also next. And more presentations. We went to to a collection in Oslo in June, and that was fun.
I think my question might be a little bit similar to that, but I was like kind of wondering how Inuit seamstresses and even Inuit makers can be in contact to like kind of like, or is there plans for if you want to like share that information with Inuit makers that, and then my second question is like, because I went to AMNH a couple weeks ago, unfortunately with no Inuit, but thankfully with fellow Indigenous friends, so that was helpful. But I was really, really intrigued by the colors on some of like the caribou fur, like it was like yeah. So I'm curious to know if you guys have any insights on how they were dyed. Like, would it have, like, I have very curious about that. I don't know if you guys have any insights on it.
Yeah, there's a picture showing. I'll point it out if it comes. But this is part of the work that we wanted to do, is to share what we've been doing so that we could either inspire other people to do the same thing, or like to learn from what maybe our mistakes or what we've learned or what has worked really well for us. So that's what we're wanting to do. We've also talked about maybe taking in, like us becoming the mentors and taking in another cohort, but we haven't got there yet. So yeah, but your question about the dyed leather, we had similar questions too, so I'll just pass it on.
Yeah, because we saw in one of the piece is like, Krista, that's dyed red, and look, this one's dyed blue. How did they do that? And our theory is that explorers came and went, and the explorers, like they're going to bring materials that the Inuit wants to buy in exchange for these piqutiit, either garments or whatever that they could sell to the museums, right? So one of the either explorers, trader, or whaler thought, hey, why don't I bring a dyed powder thing, and maybe they would want to buy it. So Captain Kom or Pasagiyaka is the one that brought the dyed. Are you talking about the blue and the red?
It was so vibrant. Like, I was really surprised.
I've been trying to figure out how to ask this question, but just to touch on your comment, Rostina, about the interconnected patterns and sharing. One big observation and experience that I think all of us have seen in our communities is the protection of patterns. There are seamstresses who will not share those patterns, and it's with the intention of keeping that part of the lineage for the community and within that family. So how do you explore or navigate having that conversation and pushing those boundaries to try new patterns? What does that look like without, I don't know, experiencing backlash or, I don't know.
No backlash here. Like I said, my mom wasn't a seamstress, and I don't have aunts living with me. My great-grandmother, who was Cree, was the best seamstress you could think of. But I didn't meet her. I only know of her. And I think part of her DNA is within me that I could do this, and my mom always says that. But I know for a fact some people, with the sealskin cleaning that I do when I miqulsi, my mother-in-law told me never to, don't tell those people, because I shared what I learned because I want everybody to know. And she was offended that I was sharing to other people. Even though she said, don't share those, I share. I want everybody to know. And whatever backlash they have, it's just going to elastic back to them.
Qinnirajaattuq, when you say about how our ancestors, our elders wanting to preserve and maintain and keeping with the family. So if you look at history, back then it was family of pockets together all the time. So the thought of like between maximum of 1, 2, 3 months that they would intermingle, and then they would go to their separate ways. So that was never an issue back then. And think about assimilation, how you were put to shame of being Inuk and the pattern. That's the other factor. So it's many little things adding up. If you, like I tell the group here, I'm giving you permission to be creative. I'll back you up because I understand the traditional pattern. I understand where it comes from and whose pattern is what. I could support them and vouch for them that through us, through me, I'm giving them permission to be creative. And ask the elder, what's going to happen if the pattern, what's going to happen with the pattern when you die? Is your pattern going to die with you? And your descendants will now only wear store-bought clothing. And part of their heritage will be lost because you did not give the knowledge to your next descendants. Does that answer your question?
I think we've experienced that a lot. A lot of us have. And like for me, when I was growing up, I could never find patterns or clothing that fits me because I'm taller than most of my cousins, or, so it was always difficult for me to have clothing that fit me. And so I've had to learn how to adjust patterns and make them my own. So that's one way, is like get a pattern. And like Rostina was saying, the sleeves were from that pattern, that was from that pattern, and make it your own, and then it's your own and you can share it with whoever. The other thing I think that's important is like find people that will support you and share patterns. And that's been really meaningful for us. And that's what I hope for everyone, is to find those people and that can support you or like show you how to adjust the pattern or make your own. And I think any of us would be happy to do that if anybody reached out and said, hey, can you help me with this?
I just want to contribute to what you're talking about. Also, a little into your question. About 10 years ago, I made a whole Greenlandic national suit in white as an art piece. And I went to Qinnirajaattuq, where you learn how to do traditional clothing. And they were like, why are you making a white one? And I was trying to tell them it's an art piece. It's like an idea. And they were like, they would guide me. You do like this, but they didn't want to touch, like they didn't want to be a part of it, but they would teach me. And they warned me and said, the elders are coming. You just be aware, the elders are coming for you. They're gonna say things when you exhibited this white national suit. And I was like, okay, I will have that coming because, I believe in my vision. At the end, when I had the exhibition called The Whiteout, I invited all of the seamsters and I told them, you are the VIPs for this because, I couldn't make a national suit without help from women, from the community, And they were so important to me in the process, and it was so hard learning how to sew and to do this piece. And they ended up being very proud. So when I said they're working and people were coming, and they would be like, what are you doing? They would be like, oh, she's making an art piece. She's making an art piece, like, oh yeah, And I think the whole thing changed because they saw that I didn't want to make a joke. I didn't want to do it bad. I wanted to do it properly. And I wanted to make it good. So all those maybe prejudice they had against this art piece and what they were protecting was not the national suits, but the techniques and the traditions. Because when we had a discussion about this, what do we do with our heritage, our patterns, and everything, the elders were like, they were just so concerned about how you make it, not how it looks, but how you make it. Do you make it properly? That it actually tapped into something else. It wasn't about how it looked like. It was how about you make it, and that's the difference. I don't know if it helped you in your question. Yeah. Oh, well.
Thank you. Before I forget, I just realized we have been using hashtag Agguaq and hashtag Agguaq in Slavics as well. So you could check that and keep an eye out for when we create our social media. We have like 2 minutes left. I don't know if anyone has one last question or if people want to come up and take a look at some of these garments.
I never thought about ever going to a museum, ever, until they asked me. And Krista's been instrumental in guiding us through the archives. I wouldn't know what to do without her. So shout out to her. And I highly, highly, highly recommend go see your archives. Go look at your history. There's some there. We just don't know where they are. But go look at them. Connect with them. Kayan na mi.
Okay, Kayan Namik.